Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are listening to us from. We are very happy to have you here today, and I'm very pleased to welcome you all to our panel discussion on women in science at our conference today. My name is Jill Fiedler-Kelly. I'm the president of the Cognigen Division of Simulations Plus. I am a trained statistician, and I've been working in pharmacometrics my entire career from when we first started Cognigen back in 1992. Just to kick things off today, wanted to let you know that, we've got a poll up right now and asking you to give us some feedback on what you think the biggest challenge is for women in science today. As that poll plays out and you answer those questions, wanted to let you know that our session today is really a continuing discussion from a discussion we started last year at our inaugural MIDD Plus conference, where we talked about women in science. And at that time, we really focused on the current state of where things were with respect to representation of women in scientific fields. We talked about challenges and obstacles that women were facing to achieving greater representation, seeing women in these fields, seeing women in leadership positions. And our panel of 9 women from the various divisions of Simulations Plus at that time shared some personal stories and some reflections, some thoughts for the future, and really, told, very personal reflections on their experience. And it was a great session. We really felt like what the main takeaway was from last year's session is that awareness of these issues is really kind of the first step to making some progress and moving forward. And I think there were a lot of enlightening, encounters during that meeting. So that being said, if you are interested and have not seen that session, you can certainly go to the Simulations Plus website and find that in our resource center if you want to listen to it. So as we started to prepare for this year's discussion and think about how we can continue that theme, we looked at the media and kind of what information is out there and said that, a year later, after we first shared that information about where things stood at that time, finding evidence of significant progress in this area is really challenging to find, unfortunately. And the pandemic is really just one of the major issues and reasons why that is difficult. We found that during this last year, the second year of the pandemic, women in the workforce are even represented less than they were before, and many women have had a lot of significant challenges in dealing with the consequences of that. So with that in mind, as we thought about a great topic to talk about and engage our panel on today, we brought in 9 women, new voices, new presenters this year from, again, the divisions of Simulations Plus. And we thought that what we'd focus on is really ways to support women in science. We wanted to give the audience some really great takeaways in terms of the experiences of this panel and our personal sort of career trajectory and the kind of things that we've faced, and some suggestions that we might have for the audience in terms of how we could improve the current situation and support women better. So with that in mind, today's discussion is going to focus on these general themes. We're going to talk about mentorship for women in science. We're going to touch on affirming our value in the workplace and some specific strategies that people can take away that have worked for the women on our panel. We're going to talk about bringing our authentic self to the workplace. And finally, we're going to wrap up and talk about some ways to actually give back, some ways to encourage young scientists to pursue careers in STEM and consider this direction. Finally, we're going to leave you with a call to action, and we're going to ask you to actually think about how you might take away from this session and the things that you've heard, some very specific ways that you might support women in science in your personal role. So with that in mind, I'm going to turn things over to our moderator, Lindsay Lehman, my colleague from Cognigen, and she's going to introduce our entire panel. Lindsay.
Thank you very much, Jill. So first of all, I moderated last year's session, and I'm honored to be able to do this again and hear from some of our new scientists who've joined us recently, and also some of our more experienced scientists who've been with us for a while. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and do our introductions of those on the panel. And Grace, let's have you start.
My name is Grace Frączkiewicz. I am an executive director of simulation studies at Simulations Plus. I've been working as a scientist for 22 years already.
Thank you very much, Rebecca.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Humphrey. I'm part of the data management department at Cognigen, and I've been working in the sciences for over 30 years.
Natalie.
Hi, I'm Natalie. I'm Associate Director in the Learning Services, and I've been working as a scientist in the pharmaceutical industry for more than 25 years.
Christina.
Hi, everyone. I'm Christina Batista. I'm trained as an applied mathematician, and I'm working as a senior scientist within the DILIsym Services Division of Simulations Plus.
Priyata.
Hi, I'm Priyata, working in the Simulation Technologies group at Simulations Plus, and I'm a senior scientist here with a background coming from systems biology and been working in the industry for around 4 years.
Laura.
Hi, I'm Laura Clemens. My background is in mathematical and systems biology, and I'm a scientist one in the DILIsym division of Simulations Plus.
Fio.
I'm Pio. I'm a scientist one from the Gamma Informatics teams at Simulations Plus, and I've been doing Gamma Informatics for about 6 years.
And Daniela.
Hi, I'm Daniela, and I'm a pharmacist by training, and I've been doing research or involved in research in pharmaceutical sciences for 7 years.
Great. Thank you, everyone. So I think to kick off today's panel discussion, one of the first topics that we want to talk about is mentoring women in science. We want to kind of highlight the importance of a mentor, how you can find a match that works best for you. And also hear from some individuals and impact stories on, how they have been influenced by their own mentors. And then also some expectations of the role of a mentor and a mentee. So with that, Daniela, let's have you kick off the panel and share your experience with us.
Sure. I've had the opportunity to have both male and female mentors, and I was very fortunate to have amazing mentors that were actually and genuinely interested in my personal and professional development. And they were definitely an inspiration for me to pursue a career in science. So in terms of mentorship, I don't think that I got a lot from all of them, and I don't think that their gender mattered. And I benefited from having both male and female mentors because I was then able to understand the choices one has to make to get where they want to be. So, for example, I had one female mentor that chose not to have kids. Now, that wasn't imposed on her. It was her choice. She didn't regret it. And on the other hand, I also saw sacrifices that male mentors had to make to succeed in their career. And again, it wasn't imposed on them. And the level of commitment that my mentors had, it was the same. But the sacrifices were different. Now, that didn't impact a lot directly, I'd say, on our mentor and mentee relationship, but that what was important to me was how they were setting an example to me. And I did learn a lot from just observing them and understanding. And that was important for me to have a perspective of how I would envision myself in the future.
Thank you so much, Daniela. I know we also have others who want to share some experiences. And Priyata, you had brought up to this group kind of the role of a mentor and a mentee and actually the importance of what a mentee should be doing as well in this relationship.
Yeah, so in this regards, to continue on Daniela's point, one of the biggest thing that a mentee should do is to recognize, first of all, which particular skill set they would like to grow in, because growth is required in any stage of life and also in any stage of challenge that we pick up in our scientific career. So they need to then reach out to the mentor, and that's actually the responsibility of a mentee, to keep on reaching out and to pick up the action points there. The second big responsibility that lies on the mentee is to be very honest, not only the expectation from themselves and the situation that they are facing, but also with the mentor, because that's going to allow the mentor to be capable to help support the blind spots and to figure out a path forward. Furthermore, as Daniela said, she's had both female and male mentees. It's very important to have multiple mentors for different aspects of life and for different aspects of roles also that we choose in our career. So it would be really unfair to place this responsibility on one person for the rest of the long time. When it comes to the mentor, it's very, very important that they listen to the problems or to the situations of a mentee instead of solving them. It is much better to walk with them on this path. The second very important aspect is that they should not assume what they know, that the mentee knows that because they have been through that path, but the mentee hasn't. And the third is to never force down the perceptions, because it's important to share the opinion and ask the mentee to find its own path rather than trying to put your ways and trying to put the mentee in their own shoes.
Thank you so much, Pieta. Rebecca, I know you have some additional thoughts on, maybe finding that appropriate match and really what the mentor could further do to help the mentee.
Yes, I think one of the important aspects of finding a good match is finding a good personality match. And my first mentor really recognized my natural talent in programming. He would call on me when he got stuck, and I'd be able to glance over his shoulder and say, "Okay, you forgot a period right there." And but just that recognition of a natural talent encouraged me to pursue that path. And likewise, I try to, as an adult in my community, recognize natural talents in the young people that I interact with, and have that, engage in that conversation, let them know what you see in them, and just plant that seed so they can go forward with their own interests and passions.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. And the last panelist I want to hear from on this topic is from Laura. And I know you also had some personal experiences and stories that you wanted to share with the audience.
Thanks. Yeah, I have greatly benefited from having many mentors. And much like other panelists, I've had both male and female mentors, and I don't believe that the gender was particularly important at all. I think the most important characteristic I found with having a good mentee-mentor relationship was feeling really comfortable asking hard questions of your mentor and feeling like you would get a respectful and honest answer in return. And that was really critical. And I think, that relationship can sometimes take time to develop, and that may take work, as my colleagues have mentioned, on both the side of the mentee to figure out what they need out of this particular relationship, and on the side of the mentor to figure out how best to approach this particular mentee and what they need out of it. But I think that provides the most fruitful mentee-mentor relationship.
Thank you so much. And this kind of flows nicely into our next topic, which is, affirming our own value in the workplace and in the broader scientific community. So part of that, right, is acknowledging, understanding imposter syndrome. And I know we have a couple panelists who have personal experiences with that and how they've tackled that. Part of this session we want to talk about is some strategies to overcome that imposter syndrome or any other negative self-talk. And then also we want to talk about the influence of parenting and what we can do for the future generations. So with that, Fio, would you please kick us off and share some of your own experiences?
Thank you, Lindsay. Back when I was starting out to do my PhD, there was this conference that I attended, and there were about maybe 20, 30 male participating in that poster presentation. And I was in that presentation as well. There were maybe like 2 or 3 other women participants as well. And I remember the moment they announced the awards and my name was called. And the first emotion I felt wasn't happiness, because I thought they were giving me this award because I'm a woman. It wasn't the case though, but it was that voice in my head. When I won awards, fellowships, or scholarships, there was that little voice in my head that kept asking if I actually deserve it. I didn't recognize it back then that it was imposter syndrome, but I found out about it later. And I grew up in a conservative country, and growing up, I had a lot of people telling me, even my teachers, and at my best, they would say that, you are incredibly smart for a girl, but if boys try as hard as you do, you won't be able to catch up with them. And I was so frustrated to hear that they didn't recognize my intellect and put limits on me like that. I got told that even when I was at the top, even when I was in the top 10 in the national exam in the entire country. And I hated that there was a ceiling that I couldn't seem to break. And maybe that's why I used to feel that whatever success I had wasn't enough. I didn't see many strong female leaders or in technical fields. And in my country, we even washed women's garments separately from men's clothing because it's believed that mixing them could lower men's spiritual energy. I could go on, but there were external factors that could have possibly contributed to me having imposter syndrome or making me feel like I didn't belong in certain rooms or at certain tables. But it's not all bad because I have had supportive people along the way who have made a big impact on my life, like my husband, my family, my mentors and colleagues. So I'm really thankful for that. And I have also channeled imposter syndrome to be better and to be more knowledgeable at what I do. So it has helped me in certain ways as well. And I also want to convince others, women from my country and everywhere else, that there is no ceiling whatsoever that we cannot break, and we should not let society tell us what we can and cannot do, because sometimes society can really suck at recognizing potential and encouraging our growth. So we have to really push for ourselves and advocate for ourselves. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Natalie, I know you have some additional thoughts that you want to share and also highlight some strategies, and we'll also hear from Christina on some strategies as well.
Yeah, so the first thing I thought when I read the question about imposter syndrome amongst highly educated women was whether I was part of the highly educated women. So I've experienced imposter syndrome with doubt and self-negative talk for a while. Fortunately, it has improved with age, so it's something to look forward. But contrary to the common belief, research actually showed that men and women are equally prone to experience imposter syndrome, but the way to deal with it is different because the boys are raised to be certain, to not show fear, and to go for it, whereas girls are raised to be careful, to avoid risk, to wait and see. And men overall will apply to a job for which they have only 50% of the requested competencies, whereas women will need to have close to 100% of the competency to apply. So the impression that women experience it more than men is only because women are more comfortable expressing their fear and doubt than men. So to lessen the imposter syndrome, what you need to do is to admit your successes and achievements, as Fiofio was saying. And the simple way to do is to accept compliments, and this includes also rewards and recognition, and also to write black and white your achievements. While I was looking for a new job before I joined Simulation Plus, I listed all the things that I achieved in my career, and it really made me feel better about myself. And when I have doubt about my competency, I go back to that list, and it really helps.
Thank you so much, Natalie. Christina, I know you also have some strategies that you've used in the past to help mitigate those negative self-image, self-talk.
Definitely. So some of us really may hate to admit this, but sometimes that external validation can be really an important confidence starter for some of us, especially as we're trying to reduce that negative self-talk. And this is somewhere where I think all of us can kind of contribute as managers, mentors, peers, coworkers even. Rebecca hinted on this too, supporting each other and acknowledging and appreciating the talents of the people around you. So if you see someone doing something great or you're really impressed by them, take a second out of your day to tell them, give them that compliment. You don't know who needs to hear it really. And if you're on the other side and maybe you're suffering from imposter syndrome, Natalie touched on this too, keeping track of those compliments as they come in, maybe have a catalog of compliments, if you will, that you've received over the years. So in the future, when you're feeling, you're struggling to really acknowledge your talents or your skills or your abilities, you kind of reach into that catalog and you have someone that had confidence in you previously. That's enough to kickstart that confidence within yourselves.
Thank you so much, Christina, for sharing that. I think the other thing that we wanted to touch on, right, which is understanding your self-worth, self-awareness, is the influence of parenting. And I know Jill and Grace both have stories to share. Jill, let's have you start, and then Grace, you can chime in.
Sure, thanks. Yep, I think there's a lot to be said for the role of parents as mentors. It's like, it seems kind of natural that parents would be thought of as mentors for their kids. For me, when I decided to have kids, I had already started Cognigen, and we were really, my husband and I both, well into our careers at that point. And so that part of our lives was pretty all-consuming. And, then having a baby, our first, I have a daughter and a son. First was my daughter. It was really difficult to give as much to work as I had before that, and then have this little person at home that I really wanted to spend all sorts of time with. And then there was on the other side of it, the guilt that I would feel in leaving her to go to work and do the things that I really love doing. And especially difficult was travel in those days, which I loved to do, to go to conferences and visit clients. And knowing that I was putting such a strain on my husband at home and taking care of her, and then later when we had my son as well, became even more difficult. So I think, for me, kind of dealing with that, maybe even trying to overcompensate for that guilt, I would focus my energy, especially with my daughter first, on making sure that she understood, as has come up in the conversation already, that idea that there's absolutely no limit on what is possible for you. You're infinitely capable and you can do absolutely anything, and don't let anyone tell you otherwise. This is possible because of some of the challenges that I've gone through and that we all do as moms, and trying to keep our career going at the same time. I know when my daughter was faced with some career development kind of exercises in school, and to plan out what she was going to do with her life, at one point she did a project and expressed that she wanted to be an interior designer. And there was another person at school, a female teacher, who kind of, tried to gear her more toward, you have a lot of skill in math and science and you're really good at that, and maybe you could consider other things too. And I think part of it is just the societal influence of kids being introduced to and seeing those career options that are much more easy and tangible, and seeing math and science careers is a bit more difficult. So I think, that's one piece of it. And I think making sure that my kids, both male and female, and everybody's kids, really understand, that mom's career is just as important as dad's, and that, there's a balanced perspective that they can achieve from seeing you go through the challenges that you go through and how you deal with those. And I think that's really important that we give that to our kids as well.
Thank you, Jill. Grace?
So I was born and lived for more than 20 years in Poland. And when I came to US and entered graduate school to study chemistry, I was very surprised how very few women were there. There was just one American female graduate student in my year, and a few other women were foreigners, just like me. Also, there was only one female professor in the entire chemistry department. It was surprising to me, since I grew up in the country where women were holding high positions in scientific and non-scientific fields. More than 50% of chemistry department back there were women. When I grew up, I never thought that my gender can be a limiting factor in choosing profession. Also, scientists and engineers were highly regarded in this society. So after living in US for 30 years now and working as a scientist for 22 years and raising my children here, one of which is a daughter who's in college now, I think I understand this problem of gender imbalance in STEM fields better. And I think it starts early in life, when we raise our daughters immersed in a Disney fantasy world as princesses. When they go to school, it's quite often more important to parents that their daughter is popular rather than smart and educated. Basically, different expectations are applied to girls and boys. Obviously, there are many factors that shape lives of our children from the start. We as parents are the first role models. It matters that what we expose them to and what kind of values we instill in them. But society as a whole has an enormous impact, and it matters what kind of professions or people are portrayed as successful ones in the media. And let me ask you, how many times it's a scientist or engineer? It's also important to create opportunities for our children to experience or see with their own eyes what does it involve to be a scientist, engineer, mathematician, or programmer, since there are many misconceptions about these professions.
Thank you so much, Grace. I think this kind of brings us into the next panel discussion here, which is bringing your authentic self to work as a female and as a scientist. And we'll have Priyata kind of start us off with just empowering and embracing your own uniqueness.
Thank you, Lindsay. So from this aspect, I think we are fortunately now moving to a society which is becoming more global. That means we are more into a multicultural society, along with also more gender identities involved in these societies. So that gives us a bit of a time to reflect and to know that we can be ourselves, which probably a few years ago was not possible. And in this I think I, for myself, learned quite a lot when I moved from India to Germany, because Germany is a very individual-driven society versus Indian society, which is a little bit different in this aspect. And I learned to just be myself. I really learned just how to be myself here. And that actually was very empowering in all my time that I experienced here.
Thank you, Priyata. Rebecca, I know you have some other aspects that you would like to highlight with the audience today on possibly changing the language of how maybe we talk to younger generations and just women in general.
Yes, I think as a mom, I've learned the most from my daughter, who's a young adult, and her generation is going to be amazing. She has encouraged me and to reframe the way I think and the language that I use, a lot of body positivity. And, you know, I just learned to reframe the way I was thinking, because I was shamed quite often in how I presented myself as a young woman. And I didn't want to do that to my child. So instead of like shaming, trying to like give her context, like, you know, you may not be ready for the attention that outfit will bring you. And let her make her own choices that way. You know, overhearing a parent in a dressing room on a child's picked outfit, a response was, "Are you comfortable? And does that outfit make you feel confident?" And I was like, wow, I wish I'd had that language when my daughter was 12. I think it's equally important to reframe the way you think about yourself. That talk in your head is so important. And I think that's the best place to start. If you wouldn't talk to your dearest friend that way, don't talk to yourself that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that, Rebecca. I think that's important for everyone to realize and acknowledge. I think another aspect of all of this, right, is our own implicit personal biases. And Natalie, I know you have some strong data to support that, but also an experience that you want to share.
Yes. So when I was at the beginning of my career, I was at a conference, and I saw a lady coming on stage, and she was really looking amazing. And actually, my first thought was, she's not going to be good. And actually, she was perfect. And I realized afterward that I was shocked how I thought. And since then, I've been very careful not to judge people on their gender or on the way they look, and not to judge their competency with that. And in fact, there are really bias towards women. The results of an investigation that was conducted by the United Nations in 2020 showed that 9 out of 10 people, so both men and women, actually are biased toward women. And there was an experiment, recruiting experiment, that was conducted at Yale University, which was very interesting, because in that experiment, a man and a woman were applying for position. I mean, they were actors, and they were judged by a panel which comprised 2 women and 2 men. And they were the same age, their CV was the same, their competency was the same, the way they said the text about what they wanted to do and so on was the same. And actually, they ran that experiment 100 of time, and in most cases, the man was chosen instead of the woman, even though they had exactly the same competencies. And in fact, in order to try and stop this bias, we need to become aware about this bias, but it's difficult because they are usually unconscious. So we don't know about them. So we need to raise our awareness. And a way to do that is to go on the internet, because there are a lot of tests available. But I think that if we want to reach a wider audience, companies should organize training for people to raise their awareness on implicit bias, whether it's against gender, race, age, or anything like that.
Thank you so much for that, Natalie. I think at this point, this kind of transitions really well into, you know, women supporting women. What is it that we can do going forward? How can we give back, encourage other young women and girls to pursue careers in science and STEM? And with that, I know there's some initiatives out there. One of them, Grace, is very involved in. So Grace, would you please share your story with us?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, so we as a Pioneer Simulations Plus division in Lancaster sponsor Tech Trek, which are 1-week camps in STEM, related to STEM fields held in summer at campuses around the country. All campers are nominated by their 7th grade math and science teachers and then selected by a committee. And these camps expose young girls to science, technology, engineering, and math through hands-on problem solving and encounters with women role models in STEM. And Tech Trek helps girls see their futures while having fun. And for many girls, the week-long camp sparked their curiosity and placed them on the path towards success. We sponsor these Tech Trek camps both financially and by sending representative women scientists to attend the award ceremony each year and sometimes to give a speech during the ceremony showcasing our professional stories of women working in STEM fields. Survey of Tech Trek alumni demonstrates that program has lasting effect on many levels, including interest and confidence in STEM fields, a decision to pursue those fields and future career plans. And there is a result of this survey that Jill, I don't know if Jill is showing that, yeah, okay. That Tech Trek alumni surprised the national average in most advanced math and science courses, both in respect to the girl peers who did not attend these camps and the boys. And also 73% of respondents said that Tech Trek introduced them to STEM college majors, of which they were previously unaware. And 87% of respondents said Tech Trek introduced them to new STEM careers. So I think that initiative is very important and it's working, as we can see from these statistics.
Thank you, Grace, for sharing that with us. I know we have others also on the panel that have been part of volunteering efforts and also the recipient of some of those efforts and opportunities. So Christina, let's hear from you. And then Laura, I would love to hear from you as well.
Sure, thanks. Yeah, so I've been fortunate to kind of be on both ends of these situations. So as an undergraduate, I attended a summer program for women in math. And this program had many wonderful aspects that I won't go into here, but one of those aspects was they brought in female mathematicians in different career paths and different industries, and they kind of shared their story about how they got to exactly where they were, but more importantly, they told me exactly what they were doing in those positions. And this was really an invaluable experience for me. I chose to major in math simply because I was good at it and I thought it was fun. But I really had no idea what I was going to do with that career-wise. And I especially didn't know at the time that math modeling could be used in pharmaceuticals. So attending that summer program really gave me direction and the rest of my undergraduate and graduate career. And then while I was in graduate school, I decided to kind of give back, and I volunteered for a similar program that connected middle school girls with females in STEM careers. So these middle school girls had been identified as their teachers by interest in some of the STEM subjects. And so we went on field trips and did all sorts of fun mathy and science things. But more importantly, I established relationships with each of these girls, and I still stay in contact with them. Sometimes they text for homework help, which is fine. But more importantly, they text and ask, what courses should I take, or what majors do you think would be appropriate as I'm applying to colleges now? And so I think those relationships and kind of helping support women from a young age can better women in the field later on.
Thanks so much. And Laura?
Thanks. Yeah, I'll echo that. I had the good fortune when I was much younger to participate in some of these programs that are aimed at getting girls interested in math and science. I wasn't involved when I was younger in Tech Trek, but we had an analogous program in Northern New York that I participated in. And that's really, these types of programs are really valuable for giving opportunities for girls to learn and get interested in math and science and learn new skills that maybe they wouldn't have the opportunity to in their regular school. And so those are really important. And when I got into graduate school, I was able to give back as well. And I did actually mentor for Tech Trek and similar other types of programs involved in getting not just girls, but there's another program called Cosmos, which I also participated in, getting people involved in math and science. And so I really promote both of those activities, and also getting involved in outreach at the undergraduate and graduate school level, because once we get these girls into science, we'd like them to stay in science. And so, you know, going back and giving talks about what we're doing now to our undergraduate institutions is a really nice way to say, hey, you know, look at what we can do with all of these cool things that we learned in undergrad and graduate school, and stick with it.
Thank you so much, Lara. That kind of brings us to the end of our formal panel discussion. I hope the audience has found, you know, some real nuggets of information and just inspiration from today's discussion. We will have a few minutes to take questions from the audience, and then following that, we kind of have a call of action to the audience that we want to display in a poll, and would love to hear from you on what you think you can do in the next 60 days to support women in science, or, you know, future generations. And you'll see the poll just popped up, so we would love to hear from you on what you think you will do in the next 60 days. We do have one question from the audience right now and I'm just going to read it. And Jill, I think I'll punt this over to you to maybe elaborate on. But the comment is, it's great to see scientists presented over multiple years of experience. To those with experience of 20 plus years, I would like to hear your thoughts on the progress or lack thereof of women in science then, when you started, and now. So Jill, let's have you start the discussion, and we can hear from others if there's other responses.
Sure. Yeah, happy to respond to that. Honestly, I think in the pharmacometrics realm that I can speak to most directly, I've seen tremendous progress in these 20 plus years. When I first got started, there was one person that I could think of and point to who was kind of a generation beyond me, who had established a presence in this area. And that was it. Everyone else was male. Everyone at the FDA, everyone everywhere else really was males. And certainly there were a lot of contemporaries of mine who were women. And now today, I don't see that disparity at all, at least in our realm. And I can see a really balanced perspective. You can point to, things like, I know GSK's CEO is a female, and, there are other women in the pharmaceutical industry who have achieved executive leadership positions and things like that as well. So I think it's definitely improving over this time. And the other thing that I can point to is having been on committees of professional organizations where awards are being given out and things like that. There is definitely a really obvious sort of, it's out there, and everyone talks about when we're making these decisions to make sure we are being inclusive and we are really considering these factors. And I think, all the societal factors and the things that have gone on the last few years are helping with that. And it's not just, a gender issue, but in general, I think everybody is much more aware. And I think that's really helping. And I see great progress really over this time period.
Thank you so much, Jill. Is there a Grace and Natalie and others? I know, Rebecca, I know several of you have been in the field for 20 plus years. Is there any other comments that you want to share?
Sure, I can add to it. So maybe the closest to the heart is our company. And when I joined Simulations Plus, we were a startup at that time, but I was just the only one female scientist. And now we have, I think, at least 50%, if not more, female scientists in our division, and probably in other divisions. So it's a big difference. And yeah, I don't know what is the situation in graduate schools, how many women, girls versus boys, in STEM departments, but my suspicion is it's a little bit better than it was. I think in general, in US, we face the problem not only with girls, but also with boys entering STEM fields. If you go to any graduate school in these fields, you will see mostly foreign graduate students. For some reason, science is still not that popular in US. You know, the same when I ask my daughter, who is right now in college and thinking about choosing the field, she said that 90% of her floor in the dorm are business major. So you can see kids choosing mostly business or business field or something, you know, liberal arts, or wanting to be lawyers later in life. That there are not that many people who want to become scientists. So I think in general, we, as a society, we have to work on it.
Mm-hmm. Rebecca or Natalie?
Actually, I was encouraged listening to Christina just now that their experiences as women and being introduced to careers is encouraging. And it never occurred to me that I wasn't introduced to more careers in science and what could I do with my natural abilities because I was a woman. I actually had my undergrad advisor tell me, why are you getting a physics degree when you're just going to get married and have babies? But, you know, fortunately, I just dismissed that because I don't really care. And, you know, I also experienced being the only woman in a programming class. And quite honestly, the professor spent the whole class just trying to be a matchmaker. And I just dismissed that and did my own thing. And so I'm encouraged to hear the experiences of the young women today. And I do feel it's kind of turning a corner.
Well, thank goodness you didn't listen to any of that, and we got to have you enter, you know, the scientific field as, you know, a real contributor. Natalie, do you have anything further you want to add?
No, not really. I mean, I think that there is an and it's fortunate, but I still think so. I didn't really want to say it because it's the glass half empty, but I think there is still some room for improvement. And when I was reading the thing about the bias about women, it was, yeah, I expect that. So there is still a bias. There are still some way to go. But yeah, I think now more women are in science, and we see that in the department, but still a bit of way to go.
Thank you so much. We have a few more minutes left if there's any other questions from the audience. Okay, I think at this point, you know, I would love to just kind of give a overview of where we stand with the poll. So, you know, our call to action was what will you intend to do in the next 60 days? There's a pretty high percentage here who both said they'll look at their own negative self and personal implicit biases and work towards eliminating them, which is great. I'm hoping a lot of the panelists today inspired you to do that, and the strategies that were provided will help everyone. The other is looking for opportunities to recognize individuals' competencies and promote them in the scientific work and profession that they have interest in, which is also extremely encouraging. And we're hopeful that we continue to progress as a society towards, you know, narrowing that STEM gap for women and girls. And with that, I think, you know, we're happy to continue this conversation any other way. Feel free to reach out to us individually or as a panel. If you have other questions that you want to pose, this will stay open for a couple of minutes and we can always follow up with you after that. But I want to take the opportunity to thank the panelists today. Your stories were really inspiring. Your strategies are very helpful, and I think they're going to benefit those who participated as an audience member today. Oh, I saw another question pop up. Hold on, don't go anywhere. Let me see. And I cannot get to it. Jill, can you see
How can you mail colleagues How can your male colleagues best support the advancement and inclusion of women?
Thank you, Grace. Any thoughts there?
I would say like the best, sorry, yeah, please.
No, go ahead.
I like from my end, I would just say that the best way is just to acknowledge them as a peer and not as a kind of a gender specific person, and also to not have biases with in the conversation, because many times women are more emotionally driven in the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And like removing that bias from the conversation from a male perspective can many times help see the point which is coming forward in the conversation.
Other thoughts?
I'd like to add a comment. I think one of the pieces of advice that I've seen floating around for kind of getting people's work recognized is to, when you're having conversations and you see that someone has, made a statement, if you agree with that statement, say so. Say, oh, I agree with, and name the person. It doesn't feel natural, and this is not something we do very often, but it's a really good way to point out that, give credit where credit is due and say, oh, this person made a valuable contribution. And that's a good way of reinforcing, whose ideas are being brought to the table. And that's a good way to kind of point out, that, we are all contributing here, and kind of sets the stage for that. And it has the bonus of addressing some of the kind of imposter syndrome negative self-talk, because when the person hears that, it says, hey, I'm acknowledging you, and that feels really good also. Yeah. And so that kind of hits both sides, and is, not something you would just apply to women. Do that for all people. Everyone likes to know that they are being heard.
And valued, right?
And valued, yes.
Yeah. Great, thanks everyone. That kind of brings us to the end of our session. Great job, and we look forward to continuing this conversation. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.